Alright, good evening folks, it's Enforcer Matt and welcome back to another short war summary, and today we're receiving breaking news coming out of Russia that the Russian government has decided to rapidly speed up the production of that anti-satellite nuclear weapon that was being talked about at length about a week ago by the American government as a major national security threat, and it appears it's ready to go much sooner than expected. So obviously not good news on that front. And we're also learning that Navalny's brother is currently also being hunted by the Russian government. So it appears Putin has it out for the entire Navalny family at this point, which is very bad news as well. So let's go ahead and jump right into our first article of the day, which goes to Apex News on Twitter. And Apex reports that the US has told allies that Russia could deploy a nuclear weapon or a mock warhead into space as early as this year, per people familiar with the matter, and that was reported by Bloomberg. So this explains why the US and the West are suddenly becoming so panicked about this weapon being developed by Russia, because it's not a few years off from development. It's actually ready to go as early as this year. So that's why we're so concerned about it. And like we said many times over, this is a massive threat to national security. This has the potential to knock down our military communication systems in the United States and also the West as well. And just to mention, it's not good that an adversary of the West is putting a nuclear weapon into orbit first. That is not good, and we need to address that rapidly because it is an urgent threat. It is much more immediate than we previously thought, and that's not good. So that's all the information we have on that at the moment, but we're still looking for more information to come out as soon as possible. But nonetheless, we're moving on into our next post here, which goes to Visegrad 24, and we're returning back to the story of Yulia Navalny, who's now taking over the position that her husband had as opposition leader in Russia. As you know, that's a very dangerous position to take, and also it's very brave on her part to take that position. And I think she's putting herself in grave danger, but nonetheless, we have to recognize that she is taking a very brave stance against the Russian government. She is just one person like her husband was before, and that is a lot of responsibility to take on. So I applaud her for that. But we are learning some very disturbing things happening in the background as well, which we see here in our next post here from Fitux News. And we're learning here that Russia has initiated a new criminal case against Oleg Navalny, who is the brother of the dead Russian opposition figure Alexei Navalny, and that was reported actually by Russian state media. So that is obviously indicating to me that Putin plans to wipe out the Navalny family. Which is obviously not good because they are opposition in Russia to Putin, and our objective in the West is to get Putin overthrown eventually, so that way we can hope that the next leader is not as violent and also as deplorable as him, and it doesn't decide to invade countries like Ukraine. But right now, it's looking like Putin has it out for the entire Navalny family, and they're in grave danger. So in the next post here, we're learning even more about this new case opened against Oleg, which is Navalny's brother. It says here from Nexa that the Russian Interior Ministry has put Alexei Navalny's brother Oleg back on the wanted list, according to the agency's news board. So not only has a criminal case been opened into Oleg, but he's now actually being actively hunted by the Russian government to be taken back into custody. So he's in the most danger right now of everyone, so not good whatsoever. But with that, we're moving on to our next post here, and we're learning what the White House in America is saying about what they're going to do about the death of Navalny himself. The United States is promising a major sanctions package on Russia on Friday in response to the death of that leader, Navalny. So more sanctions. We've seen in the past that Russia has been harmed by Western sanctions, but they haven't worked as well as we had previously hoped. So some people speculate that the sanctions are at their max efficiency and efficacy at the moment. And in my opinion, I think that we've sanctioned Russia about all we can at the moment. So to say that we're coming out with a major sanctions package, I'm not exactly sure what that'll entail because we've done pretty much everything up to this point. So I'll be curious to see what that turns out to be, and hopefully it's something that'll actually damage the Russian economy, so that way we can actually put some punishment on them for doing this heinous act here. But with that, we're moving on to our next post, which goes to Nexta on Twitter. And unfortunately, we're seeing a souring of relationships between Ukraine and also Poland here over that grain crisis, which has been brewing up for quite a while now, and it seems to be reaching a peak. We see here in the post from Nexta, it says a representative of the main directorate of intelligence of Ukraine, Andrei Yusov, has criticized the actions of Polish farmers at the border who have begun blocking the grain shipments and also spilling Ukraine grain as well. Yusov says it is a conscious and public display of xenophobia and a justification of genocide against Ukrainians, and it is simply impossible to allow and tolerate such disgusting acts. And it says here the Ukrainian grain which the farmers dumped on the ground was on its way to Germany via Poland. So first off, we have to say right off the bat that it's not good that they're having this dispute over the grain. I understand the Polish side, and I also understand where the Ukrainians are coming from as well. To break it down very quickly, the Ukrainians want to sell their grain to make sure they have enough money to fight their war, and at the same time, the Polish want to make sure that their economy is protected from cheap grain and basically not watered down by cheap prices coming out of Ukraine. So that is the root of the issue here, and the Polish farmers seem to have had enough. They are showing up and making very charged statements against the Ukrainian grain shipments coming in. And it appears here that the Ukrainians are even ramping up the rhetoric themselves. And Yusuf has ramped it up to a level 11, which in my opinion is a very bad thing to do, because I don't take the charges such as genocide and xenophobia very lightly. And I don't think Poland does either. That, in my opinion, is a foolish statement to make. That Yusuf fella should never have made that statement. And, you know, to me, that's deplorable to even say something like that, to compare this grain dispute to a genocide. A genocide is very serious. That's about as serious as it gets when it comes to atrocities, and that word shouldn't be slung around lightly. So while I'm confident this grain issue will get resolved, there needs to be some more thought put into statements, especially by Yusuf here, who's a part of the intelligence division of Ukraine, before making statements such as that. That's not helpful, and I really don't agree with that whatsoever. But of course, it comes down to personal opinion, and let us know in the comments below. But with that being said, we're moving on to our next post here, which is from Flash News Ukraine, and this is also on the topic of that grain dispute issue. And there appears to be some issues on the ground there on the Polish border. It says the Polish police have already detained a farmer with a Soviet flag and a poster addressed to Putin, reports an agency on social media, and he allegedly faces 2 charges, which are incitement and praise of Putin's aggressive war and propaganda of totalitarianism. So we appear to have some agitators on the ground, or at least some Soviet sympathizers, but that is not to characterize the entire group of protesters as pro-Russians. That is simply not true, and I hope that's not what this post is getting at right here, because I don't believe that to be the case. The Polish, including the government, has been making an issue about this for some time, and it's not simply Russian sympathizers that are coming out there and making an issue about the cheap grain coming into their country. But that's about all to cover on that post right there, so let's go ahead and jump right into our next one, which goes to Fintux News, and we're learning here that the Belarusian President Lukashenko is saying that Polish and U.S. intelligence are preparing a large-scale provocation against the Polish civilian population, which they will blame on Russia and Belarus, according to himself. And I think we can all agree at this point that pretty much everything that comes out of Lukashenko or Putin's mouth is almost always a lie, and we can't put any stock into this whatsoever, but we had to report on it because it is making the news rounds today, but obviously nothing's going to happen. The U.S. is not in the business of doing that. Right now, we're having a hard enough time getting aid to Ukraine, and I really doubt we're looking to start a large-scale provocation while we simply can't get aid passed to our allies. So this is bull right here, to put it pretty plainly, and I don't put any stock in it whatsoever. But moving on to our next post here, we have one from Nexta, and this is quite a piece here. We see some guys chumming up to one another, and Putin has presented Kim Jong-un with a new limousine. And our boy Kim Jong-un didn't receive just any limousine. He received one of those fine quality Russian-made Aurus limousines I've never heard of before, allegedly worth more than $440,000 for his birthday, which must translate to roughly about 1 billion rubles or something like that, because Russian currency is worthless. And it also mentions here in the post that the sanctions have been violated by doing that, because the restrictions do prohibit the importation of luxury goods, including these cars, to North Korea. So Kim has been upgraded from a Mercedes, which is a quality German-made limousine, to an Aurus limousine made by a Russian company. To me, that's a downgrade, if I do say so myself. I would rather take the fine quality German car over that Aurus Russian-made thing that probably doesn't work right any day of the week. But Kim may or may not use it, actually. We'll have to wait and see if he actually ends up replacing his Mercedes or not. But Kim and Putin are warming up to each other quite nicely, while Putin's also warming up to Hamas and all the terrorist groups in the Middle East. So it's par for the course. But anyways, we're moving on to our last post here, which is really good news, and this is from Volodymyr Zelensky himself on Twitter. And as we can see here, Zelensky is thanking Sweden personally for the massive $683 million defense assistance package, which is the largest to date that has been given by Sweden to Ukraine. It's a lot of military aid included in that, and it is definitely a huge benefit to Ukraine while the U.S. support is being held up in Congress. So this is exactly what we hope for, since the U.S. support is getting held up, that the EU would step up and basically fill in the shoes of the United States and help support Ukraine in this trying time. And we're seeing that happening right here. and I'm very glad to see it. But with that being said, that is our last piece of news for the day. It was actually a pretty big news day today. I thought it was going to be a light one, but it actually turned into quite an interesting news day indeed. But if you found this video informative, please press the like button and subscribe to the channel as well. That greatly helps us out and helps us get the news out. And if you want to support us financially to help us keep this entire operation running, you can click the link in the description below to our Patreon page and sign up over there as well. So once again, we appreciate you all for watching. We hope you found it informative, and please join us tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern to get a more in-depth view of the war in Ukraine. And once again, bye-bye for now.